Everyday injustice. Too many wrongful convictions. Corruption has infected the criminal justice system, leaving too many people helpless, fighting for their lives. Instead of receiving justice, people suffer. Is that why they say justice is blind?
Hello, and welcome to the Everyday Injustice podcast. I'm your host, David Greenwald. For the past 10 years, we have operated Vanguard Court Watches in California, including San Francisco, Sacramento, and Yolo counties. Our goal? Expose everyday court injustices, and now, more broadly, shine a spotlight on injustices in the entire criminal justice system, in the form of wrongful convictions, police and prosecutorial misconduct, and mass incarceration. This podcast hopes to take it a step further and highlight criminal justice reform on a national level.
Everyday injustice.
Today on Everyday Injustice, we have Karen Chien of the San Francisco Public Defender's Office. She is the managing attorney of the Mental Health Unit, and today we're going to be talking about the CARES Act. Welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me, David.
So I'm going to have you explain what the CARES Act is.
Well, the CARE Act is in response to our housing crisis in the state of California. And the court, it's meant to be a place where people who are in crisis to be able to refer to the court and get a care plan, a legal representative, a advocate. So the individual who will refer will be able to get on the path of recovery and be able to survive in the community. That's basically to alleviate folks who are on the verge of losing their lives.
And so what are your concerns with this act?
I think my concerns are, first of all, the act it's a good humanitarian gesture. It's trying to solve the problem that we're all very concerned. But I think the CARE Act is to require all counties to provide this court. However, there's not enough detail in the CARE Act to provide guidance, funding, and also it doesn't give us the immediate solution to solve our problem. The CARE Court doesn't start till, in San Francisco, we're one of the counties that are going to start on October 1st, 2023. So a year from now on. But as you can see, the crisis around us, every day it's now. So we have to wait for 12 months, right, to do this. So number one. Number two, it doesn't really address the housing crisis that we have, so we can have affordable housing for folks. Also, because we have all these special programs, we need to have an advocate, we need to have a care plan, we probably need a courtroom, we probably need a case manager for most of the clients. And I think one advocate is not enough. We need the whole care team. So it's just not the advocate. So in terms of what we're overlooking is the lack of resources and especially the workforce that's going to support the folks to be successful in this care plan or this care court scheme. And in San Francisco in particular, David, as you know, we have a very robust collaborative court. We have Veterans Court, Transitional Youth Court, Young Adult Court, Parole Court, Mental Health Diversion, Behavioral Health Court, Misdemeanor Behavioral Health Court. That's just in the criminal division. People who have special needs, they go to these courts to get services. In the civil court, which the majority of my practice focus is conservatorship, assisted outpatient treatment program, and also the housing conservatorship. So that's in the civil court. So we already have a very good infrastructure. So the care court adding to it, it may be a little bit of redundancy. So it really doesn't fit into what we already have. And on top of that, David, is that we have mental health SF, which is the universal care for mental health services in San Francisco. And that's also a scheme, a legislation that makes sure everybody that needs treatment will have access to treatment and will provide the needs that the treatment they need or the services for whatever their needs are in order to be safe. So we already have that. So how can we, I think the challenge for San Francisco County is how can we have the care court scheme sort of streamlined into what we have so we don't waste resources. We don't go, keep circling around. So we could have something that we can move forward. And that's going to be the big challenge.
And I've also heard from a lot of folks concerned that this is kind of mandated or coercive care. Do you have a concern there too?
Yes, especially individual rights and whether someone is being hauled into court and you have to do A, B, C, and D. It's always a coercion. And I think that criminalizes people who are homeless, criminalize poverty. And also, I don't want to be offensive, but I think care court, it's very similar, like a steps sibling of Laura's Law, aka also known as assisted outpatient program. So I always said it's a tiger without the teeth in some way, because yes, it's coercion, but how can you invite people to court? If they don't want to come to court, how can you engage them in a dignified way so they will receive services voluntarily, which I think would be much more effective to engage someone voluntarily, to help someone to achieve their goal. For example, if I want to get an ID, I'll help you get an ID. And the next step is, hey, how about now that you have an ID, let's look for housing. If you need housing, how about have a case manager so we can set up your SSI, set up your clinic visits. It's a one step at a time. We can't achieve this in a short period of time. And that's why I think it doesn't work effectively when you get somebody to court. Immediately people will say, I don't want to do this. That's the first reaction. And the other thing, I think, David, for working in conservatorship court for over 2 decades, it is very important to have the continuum of care in our city. It's not just catching someone at the beginning of the crisis, but to help them along the way to have that continuum of care. So not just save them at the point of crisis and then not continuing to usher them through the pathway of recovery.
So let me ask you this question, because I agree with pretty much everything you said, but there are going to be some people that say, okay, look, we understand it would be better to get people to do stuff voluntarily, but the fact of the matter is, a lot of people just won't. So what do you do for those people?
Well, how to engage the unengageable? I think number one, you need to have competent workforce, good case managers, people consistently go out and work with them, the population that we wanted to help out. So that's number one. By forcing someone, it only works during the time of coercion. As soon as, we have 72 hours, 5150, 14-day, 5250. So once that's over, that's why we keep catching the people who are in crisis. We never get around to make sure the Band-Aid is healed, the scar is healed. We're going to work on how to not have that injury, that wound on your arm, the same arm that you came in. So first of all, I think it would be more effective for Medi-Cal to say, reimburse somebody who are in care crisis beyond 24 hours. Now it's 23 hours. So if I'm in crisis, I don't know if I can come out of crisis in 23 hours, and I probably be kicked to the curb when Medi-Cal stop reimbursing my provider, right? So I think we need to fix those problems. That's one, Medi-Cal reimbursement, how to make sure people get the help they need and they are covered during period of crisis. Number two, for example, I believe earlier this year, we purchased a building on Geary Boulevard, at which half of it was supposed to be safe injection site. The other half was a crisis diversionary unit. And that's part of the crisis diversionary unit was part of the mental health SF implementation, sort of the plan. That building's not going to be built in a year and a half. We have crisis now. So I think care court, it's something that it's not timely. And also we have to spend a lot of time to create. So why don't we front load the resources and take care of the problem as fast as we could, so we don't keep the vulnerable people repeating in crisis. And I think by doing that, then we don't have to worry about people not willing to engage, because those people who are saying they don't want it, maybe they tried before and they didn't get the help they need. So they don't want it to keep having these false promises given to them. They're not able to get the housing that's supposed to be promised if I participate in treatment. So a lot of folks, for example, they're waiting in jail to go to a bed, and the long wait kind of say, well, I don't want to wait anymore. I'm going to take this deal and plead guilty. I'll get out on the street. So we never get the chance to give them the help they need.
Yeah, and I think, as someone who is on the other side of this, and we had to deal with this with our 17-year-old a few years ago, that's a real problem. So we had a 17-year-old, he was harming himself. So we get him in, fortunately, before he hurt himself too badly, go to the hospital, be put on a 5150 hold. And then they would put him into some sort of intermediate care facility for a few weeks to get stabilized. And then as soon as he was stabilized, they turned him back to us. None of the problems dealt with. So what happens? He goes right back to what he was doing before. And so we had to go through this. How many times? 9 or 10 times. And we finally convinced our county, not San Francisco, but our county, to put him into residential care. And it took a couple years and he was finally okay. But I mean, and this was not somebody who was a reluctant. He knew he needed help. He knew he wanted help. He couldn't get the help in the system. So the problem wasn't that he was reluctant. The problem was that the system did not have the resources to help this kid.
I agree with you. And I think that probably thanks to your advocacy, he's able to access treatment. And you just got it right there. You mentioned a very important point, is the continuum of care. Yes, I'm able to assist you during the time of crisis, but what do we do after the crisis abated? How can I continue to help you so you do not come back to where you were before? How can we help you to succeed? And David, that requires building a workforce. And now, for example, in San Francisco, how can we live in San Francisco and work in mental health field with the high rent, right? So we're losing talents. People may go to another county for lower rent, lower cost of living. So in order to do that, I mean, that's where I think the legislature could have done more. Student loan aid, or maybe rent vouchers for the mental health care provider. It takes 10 years to build competent, culturally, linguistically competent staff to help people. And that's hard work. It's not something that we'll fill out a form and say, here, you go to clinic A, you get this. It's a constant engagement, and also identifying what the person needs and able to see the warning sign and have an early intervention before the crisis begins. That's what I call a successful model of continuum of care. But we need that. And care court doesn't touch that. Care court just say, here, you're in crisis, we'll take care of you. And that's it, all right? So we front load all this, keep working with the same group of people over and over, but we really don't get to help people to leave crisis and move beyond that.
Yeah. And so if you talk to homeless advocates, one of the biggest needs that they see is permanent supportive housing. That if you can get people, even people suffering mental illness, into permanent supportive housing, which means not just housing and let them run wild, but actually services in that housing, then you can deal with the other issues. But if they don't have that stability of housing, it's really difficult to get them to the point where they can even take their medicine. I mean, think about what it takes to take medicine under good conditions and then throw them into the chaos of the streets, and you can imagine just not going to work long term.
Yes. So supportive housing is very important. I think that we need to think about how we assign housing. How I think before some of the housing doesn't have on-site case management support. I think we need to think through that. I think San Jose, Santa Clara County may have a model where the supportive housing, they have folks support the individuals who are in these housing type of housing, that they can help them to stay and be successful. So that's another part of another component of workforce, that we need to be built and robust. So care court, it's a really good sort of a concept, but in terms of detail, making it work, there's a lot of resources required and a lot of many other options. And in terms of housing, supportive housing, David, I didn't know this. I'm a public defender. I said, oh, my client needs housing. Like, how about even SRO, good hotels? But see, in SRO, you have to understand, when people wakes up, the drug dealer goes to work. I mean, they're in the worst possible neighborhood, right? So how do we help them so they learn harm reduction? They also take their meds, have supportive. Then we need to have those supportive staffing there to help them, right? The other thing is that there is something called CEQA. I think it's quality housing. It's environmental quality. So a lot of people always say, I want supportive housing. But then you didn't hear the second part of sentence. It's not in my backyard. So they have all these, I think that the state government should look into CEQA and give the developer who's going to want to do supportive housing and have some kind of tax breaks or have some kind of relief, so we can actually build more supportive housing, affordable housing, so we can help our unhoused population to be able to move into a house.
Yeah. And so, even, with everything in the care court system, what I see as a huge shortfall is, they put these ideas in place, but they didn't put any funding to make them happen. So there's no housing funding, and there's no mental health treatment funding. And without those two planks, I don't see how this works. So
the county have to really advocate, each county. I think there is some money, but there are so many counties around the state. So it's going to be very challenging. I think that there needs to be an expertise how to smartly deploy the resources so we don't waste money. And then we can actually address the crisis immediately. I think, David, I cannot tell you, each day I get notice that someone, it's OD, someone who's homeless, somebody who passed away. the crisis is now, not a year or 2 years later. So yes, we do need lots of resources and funding. And sometimes it doesn't mean, just immediate, like $2 trillion to build a program, but sometimes we need some of the legislation, for example, Medi-Cal reimbursement for people who are in crisis, building a workforce in terms of housing, how to make affordable housing available to the people we need, and also have that supportive team at the housing. So it's a lot.
And then finally, from your standpoint as a public defender, how is this going to change your work, and what are you guys going to have to do as a result of this?
I think I probably need to train the staff attorney to work with the population coming into care court. We need additional attorney. We need paralegal. We may need a advocate, also who can support the client who are being referred. So there's a training. We have to have our sufficient staff to support the client. And it's not just, oh, you're a lawyer, you can do it, because I've been doing this for 22 years just for this special assignment in the mental health court. And I think it's necessary for me to learn how to speak respectfully, how to listen actively, and that takes time. Sometimes you may hear me repeating what I said. It's because I want to make sure the other person understands, the listener understands. I need to be compassionate. So I always quote my assistant. She said, yes, I'm going to treat my client differently who are vulnerable, because I'm going to be extra compassionate. I'm going to be extra patient. I'm going to be extra generous, because that's what it needs. There's no quick fix way to it, and it requires a lot of patience.
Well, this will be an interesting adjustment. You actually give me a little bit more hope than I had about this. I don't know if we'll ever get the funding that it needs, but there are aspects to this that could be beneficial if they're properly funded.
Yes, and it also requires all the stakeholders to work together. The courts, the city attorney, the city council, the public defender's office, or the legal representative, plus especially Department of Public Health, and also Department of Homelessness and Supportive Housing, even Department of Emergency and the fire department. How do you encourage that person from going from point A to point B, right? And also the service providers. So it's going to take a village, David. If it's going to work, it will work beautifully, but we have to roll up our sleeves and not think about what we did wrong or because we're doing a terrible job, but we're thinking like, how could we make it better and make it work? Despite the legislature does not give us the funding and does not give us enough guidance. And so we require to think outside of the box and creatively. So for Christmas, David, I know it's a little bit early October. I'm going to ask for like lots of programs. Whoever wants treatment, they would have access. They'd be able to access treatment, and they would get housing, so they will stay warm and safe during the winter.
So I was going to ask you as kind of a follow-up, what else should we be doing? If you could design a system that would be better, other than more money, which is obvious, what else do we need to be doing here?
I think what we need to do is we need to destigmatize mental illness and people who are unhoused. We do not, a lot of times we'll say, well, help them out so we can put them somewhere out of sight, out of mind, so the street is clean and we don't have to worry about it. That we need to take away that lens, so to speak. We don't mean to, but we just say, oh, you get help as long as, not in my backyard or not in front of my front door. So we need to destigmatize. And I think we also need to do is to work together. So for medical school, the curriculum need to change to say, how could a psychiatrist work with a psychologist, right? When somebody who's taking their meds, but they may be traumatized being years of the housing, how can we work closely with the psychologist and to do trauma therapy or substance use therapy to help them through their recovery? That's important. And how do case manager work together as a team? It's not just that hierarchy, doctor up here and we're just doing the dispatching of the order. I think people have to work together and coming together at the same table. And also it's problem solve. I think it's important, the attitude. Oh, we have a little hiccup, so how can we solve and make it better? Rather than just say, okay, this person is not engageable, I'm not going to work with him or her anymore. Don't give up.
Yeah, I think that is kind of the hard part, because you're dealing with a population that's traumatized and they've been through a lot, and they're also not thinking clearly because of various mental illnesses. And so, it's really hard, I think, to build trust and get them to the point where they can accept services. And so we kind of want to take the easy way out and just say, well, let's just compel them to do it, even though the research shows that doesn't work very well.
It's not a long-term plan. It's not a long-term solution. The long-term solution is to help when the person's not doing well, we help them. And once they stabilize, they realize that we need to give back the decision-making power and help them to go along the recovery road. And I never like to take away my client's right to make a decision. I think in the process, I explain to them what happened to the court. If you're not happy with the judge's decision for involuntary treatment, let's have a hearing so you get to hear why these services are being offered to you, these treatment are being offered to you, and you get to your say. Like, for example, if you take powerful psychiatric medications, I had a client who was a very renowned cellist, but he could not play cello anymore because the medication makes his hand more rigid. He's not able to play, but he gets to have a say in it, and that's important. And we don't have a right to take away anyone's right to speak for him or herself just because they have a mental health diagnosis. So I think, that's why it goes back to what I said earlier, is we need to remove that lens. We need to destigmatize. We need to understand that my Christmas wish, I forgot to tell you, David, is that when I go into a physical checkup, it's not just the blood work, the x-ray. In order to remove the stigma is to have a mental wellness check. Are you sleeping well? Are you eating well? Are you under stress? So that way we understand how can we do a complete health wellness care, so we don't think, oh, mental illness has only happened to someone else, it never happened to me. But 1 in 5 Americans, in some way, one way or another in their life, they may have a mental health issue. And that's the statistic that we cannot ignore. We could be stressed, we could be having some moment of anxiety attack or something, but we have to treat it like a health issue, but not something that we don't want to touch it, you deal with it and look for a quick solution and then leave them out there. They're one of us. We're part of them. So we need to embrace them and help them get well, so we don't have to keep going through the repeated cycle for them to be in and out of the hospital, stay on the street forever. We help them to move out of that phase, and we can work together. We can do it.
Well, I want to thank you for coming on and sharing some of your insight into this issue. It's really a fascinating issue and also a tragic issue.
Thank you, David.
That was Karen Chien, the managing attorney of the mental health unit in the San Francisco Public Defender's Office. We've been talking about the CARE Act. The CARE Act will be taking effect sometime next year. And the real concern is not only with compelled treatment, but it's also with the lack of resources. This has been Everyday Injustice. I'm your host, David Greenwald. Join us again next time for more tales from the injustice system.
Thank you to George Powell and Norman Mousequake Barrett for the use of our opening, Everyday Injustice. You can see more of George's music at www.justiceforgeorgepowell.com. That's Justice for George Powell, all one word, .com.